From the Atheists of Florida headquarters in Tampa, this is the Atheist Forum, a production of Atheists of Florida Incorporated. Join us now for Will the World of the Future Be Atheist? As we begin an hour of unscripted conversation about atheism, religion, state-church separation, and the associated issues of the day. And now here are the hosts of the Atheist Forum, Jim Peterson and Joe Reinhardt.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jim Peterson, and my friend here is raconteur and overall knowledgeable expert on everything, Joe Reinhardt.
Well, thank you, Jim. I will do my best to live up to that introduction. I'm afraid I'm sure to fail. Why don't you tell our audience what it is we hope to talk about? Speaking of talk about, I do want to say one quick point. Ed mentioned in the introduction that the show is unscripted. It's not just unscripted, it's almost virtually extemporaneous. We have a list of talking points. We'll go down the talking points, whatever comes to mind. It's a subject that we have some familiarity with and we talk about frequently. So hopefully the show will go quickly. It won't be tedious or boring. And I want to invite the folks at this point to send in your points. If you have some talking points that you'd like us to talk about, we'd be glad to add those to our agenda. Jim, why don't you tell us what is our agenda?
Well, as you mentioned before, our program is spontaneous and unrehearsed. Boy, is it unrehearsed. So we hope that you'll be willing to put up with us, and we'll try to reward you with whatever kind of information that we can develop that possibly could be useful. Today we're going to be talking about how our rapidly evolving secular culture is eroding traditional religious culture. And so we'll be looking at a number of different factors, including the history of our civilization, how we came about, and why we here, the two of us, are atheists, and perhaps why you might be an atheist. Well, let me start off by asking you, Joe, and you could ask me later, why are you an atheist?
Well, you're not the first person to ask me that, Jim. And frankly, I looked at the evidence, and I just failed to be convinced that there were any supernatural deities, either of the Christian variety or any other variety. So having looked at the evidence, I became an atheist. It's not something where I decided to become an atheist, I decided to wear this suit this morning. It's something you just sort of arrive at over a period of time. And it's something that you can't easily change your mind about because, again, it's not a conscious mental act that occurs at any specific moment in time. Once you become an atheist, you pretty much stay an atheist unless there's some other evidence that presents itself. So far, nothing ever has. I will also say that I like being an atheist because, having studied the issue, it's pretty clear to me that atheism is, in fact, the high moral ground. I don't like hearing about how we have to get our morals from some supreme, supernatural being. The honest truth is, right or wrong, this is my opinion. I have no reason to be hypocritical about it. I'm not into atheism for any reason other than the money.
Well, Joe, have you ever found a natural deity that you would be willing to worship? As opposed to a supernatural.
Right, I don't know what a natural deity is, but I do know that worship in and of itself is sort of rather degrading.
Do you have a cat or a dog?
No, I don't have any pets.
Well, then if you did, then you might be yourself a natural deity.
Oh, I see, to them.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
We all want to do that, I think. But we want to be a deity in the life of someone. But I think if we look at religion, I should say most of us at least, grew up in some sort of a home where religion was commonly practiced. And all religion, if you study it as Joe has studied it, is rooted in the past and attached often to narrow national, ethnic, and political goals. we can think here of all the different national churches, the Greek Orthodox and the Russian Orthodox and the Roman Catholic and the Jewish sects, and on the list goes, but it all arises from the experience and history of peoples throughout the world. And so to some extent, or to a considerable extent actually, religion is not natural at all. Religion is one of the stories that helps to unite a group of people. And so what we're trying to do is to figure out how these stories, based in the distant regions of human history, have come to affect us, what we believe about the world, and how we have changed over time. If you look at the way in which the experience of life in our time is very different from how it was 50 years ago, 100 years ago, or 300 years ago. It goes to show that human beings are very dynamic and very changeable. Religion, of course, denies this dynamism. It's trying to say that everything is locked in, solid, and you can't escape from it.
It's probably one of the main purposes of religion is not just to be founded in the past, but to stay in the past. That's why they have a creed, because everything is covered. You don't have to think for yourself. All you have to do is know the creed. And since the creed is divinely inspired, it never changes, no matter how much society or mores or any other ethic of humanity or human nature may change. Religion wants us to stay in the past. And if religion had its way every time, I think we'd all probably still be living in caves and painting in hieroglyphs at this point.
Although interestingly, our archaeologists, anthropologists have found that most cave dwellers didn't have anything like traditional religions. They had some beginnings of a notion of otherness, but again, the situation of our primordial ancestors was to try to unite together into singular clans and groups, to look toward each other for self-defense and food and sharing of whatever resources they might be able to find. It's only when we began to have surpluses, when people organized themselves into the first primitive agricultural villages, that we acquired grain and so forth, and put it up in silos, and then we had the leisure time with which to develop societies which were hierarchical, that is, which had things like, the beginnings of the priestly clan, and then after that came the aristocracy, of the landed lords, the kings, the princes, and so forth, which dominated so much of human history. But now things are changing again, and they're changing much more rapidly now. Wouldn't you think that our lives today would be much different if we held on to those ancient beliefs in their original format?
Well, a lot of those beliefs in their original format are nowhere to be found anymore.
That's right.
Unfortunately, but you know, the human race has advanced to the extent that it has overcome religion. It's not my purpose this evening or afternoon or whatever time it is where you are. It's simply to denigrate religion. But the unhappy truth is that religion has so much baggage, particularly historically, that it's very difficult to talk about it and not say things that are negative about it. You can say wonderful things about the art that it gave us, or the charities and the hospitals that they've built, and so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is that for the 1,000 years or so that religion ruled the world, knowledge didn't just stand still; it went backwards. And I don't particularly think that being rooted in the past is all as wonderful as it's made out to be. look at the advances in human comfort, in medicine, in lifespan. All of these came out of the secular world. None of them came out of the religious world. So our future, hopefully, as a race, meaning as a people, the human race, is atheism. All things unknown, they couldn't do much worse of a job than the Christians or the believers have done over the millennia when you look at the state of the world today. So just out of pure chance, I think the atheists might do a little bit better. I'd like to knock down, to get off topic, I just want to say, oh, I know all the atheists like Stalin and Mao, and they killed millions and billions of people. They didn't kill them because they were atheists. They killed them more in a religious fashion, actually. So I don't want to hear that argument. I've heard it 100 times. It won't hold water. Thank you very much.
No, it does not.
So the future of atheism is the future of the world. If we're going to overcome the world's problems, we have to do it in a secular fashion. I'd like to, I forget the comedian, but Jon Stewart. He says, the wonderful thing about religion is that it offers hope to people in a world torn apart by religion.
And that's true enough. But I think that we, what you said before is that about criticizing religion. That's not why we exist necessarily. We exist not so much to describe religion, but to try to help people understand religion. Where did it come from? What function does it have? Who are we in terms of expressing religious ideas and so forth? What does it mean? And that's what atheism represents. But it is a step into a future in which there will be no atheism, because atheism simply means without God. And in a future that is untroubled with the kinds of supernatural beliefs that we must contend with, there will be no God. That is to say that people will live their lives without reference to what a deity might think about it. And so for so long as that is the case, it's definitely going to be required that people like us be doing programs like this to help to educate people, to show them that we have a different way of life. And it's not up to us as atheists per se, but rather it's part of the growth of secular society, and how that society will tend to occupy more and more of human attention because it supplies more and more of the answers that we need. In the past, the sciences, particularly astronomy and physics and chemistry, have all looked at the world and given us a totally different picture, a totally different way of understanding what kind of a world this is and what our place in that world is. And so I think that, as you said, the secular world and the secular worldview is beginning to play a larger and larger role.
Well, I'll expand a little bit on what I said a minute ago about the fact that I became an atheist. It was just sort of a natural conclusion that I arrived at over a period of years, literally. And I think that the growth of secularism, if you want to call it that, or atheism, or whatever you want to call it, has to be arrived at naturally. It's not something that can be demanded by law or by force. It's something that people have to arrive at that sort of a worldview on their own. Once they do that, of course, and more people are doing that, then it becomes fairly easy for them to join the secular community. But I would cite the example of the USSR, of Russia. They were, by government mandate, by law, an atheist country for almost a century. And the minute they rescinded that law, the churches came springing out of the woodwork like mosquitoes after a summer rain. And the minute they did that, they began to discriminate, and they're doing it now. Look what's going on if you followed the case of the Pussy Riot, the girls who were put in jail for 2 or 3 years because they broadcast some sort of anti-government performance from a church. Just last week, they arrested something like 60 to 100 members of the Pastafarians who were having a march in, I forget whether it was Moscow or where it was, but
Pastafarians?
Pastafarians.
Explain that.
Well, it's an international movement which is, in fact, somewhat satirical and is intended as a dig at the evangelical Christian movement. But there are some people who are serious about it. I mean, after all, he was boiled for our sins. But
Well, who was boiled for our sins?
Rasta man, I guess. I really don't know. Pasta man.
Okay.
I don't follow it that
I thought it
closely,
was
but that's not the point. The point
doesn't
is,
fly?
the point is that the minute they got the opportunity, they began to persecute people again. The demonstration went on without incident, and they'd had parades before. It wasn't until some fundamentalist group called the God's Will Church called the authorities and complained about it that they came out and beat the people up and arrested them for basically having a little satirical fun. And if you think that religion will go away simply because the government wants it to go away or because you want it to go away, and I don't care how long, it will always be like the poor. They will always be with us. They just won't be 80 or 90% of the population. They'll be 10 or 20% of the population, and the power will shift at that point. But if you think they're going to come off of a $1 trillion gold mine without a fight, you better rethink that. Religion is going to be with us for a long time.
Well, I think that the illustration you used, that of the USSR, is well illustrative of the fact that you cannot enforce a point of view on people. Before the Russian Revolution, there was actually a strong anti-clerical movement in Russia because the priests and the church had taken over large portions of the real estate and appropriated the peasants' labor and so forth, their communes, what have you. And so they engendered quite a lot of dislike, shall we say. And when the revolution came, the church was overthrown, not because it was a church, but because the church as an institution had treated the peasants so badly. And however, the religious beliefs that resided in the people had been there for many, many centuries. So consequently, it was very, very difficult to, even though there was a strong apparatus to try to enforce the official atheist belief system, whatever that was, it just didn't work out. People did not accept it. And finally, after some 75 years, when the Communist Party was relieved of its power in 1990, it readily became apparent that the power of the church was still there. So it doesn't help any to as Stalin and Pol Pot and Mao Zedong discover or have discovered, or their present rulers have discovered, you cannot enforce atheism. People must be convinced about the nature of the world because of their own experience with it, because of the growth within society of a point of view that understands and has as its basis an atheistic orientation. That is, that instead of religious beliefs, we have science as the vehicle for change, as the vehicle for understanding. And this is increasingly the case with human understanding, with human psychology. So that, I think, is one of the reasons why, especially the social sciences, psychology, anthropology, and so forth, and increasingly neurology, which explains a lot of our brain activity and why we are human, why we respond the way that we do. So in that case, I think that we benefit not from heavy-handed, ideologically driven political moves to try to change people's minds, but let people discover for themselves as we are, that's what we're here for, is to encourage you to discover for yourself the nature of the world, and that the world does not need a religious explanation. Wouldn't you think that was
I think that's a
an
pretty
adequate
good
description?
summation of it. Perhaps in brief, I think the point is that in order to effect any sort of social change, you have to do it by the power of persuasion. It's virtually impossible to enforce these sort of things simply by the power of the police, which is another great quarrel that I have with religion, from the Inquisition to the anti-gay crusades, to the anti-abortion laws, to whatever. If they have a moral point of view and they want to express it, and they certainly have plenty of pulpits from which to do that, fine. That's what we're all here for, is to give our opinions and let people decide where they will. But the problem I have with them is if they can't convince you not to have an abortion, then they want to go get the police to do it for them. And if they can't convince you not to worship their God, then they want to make sure that there's a law where every kid in the country has to stand up and say wonderful things about their deity, whether you like it or not.
There has been a certain propensity over the many, many centuries of religious domination for those institutions to use force, violent force, to make sure that everyone toes the line. And we've seen it repeated over and over and over again. But hopefully, with the way that communications have changed in our society, in our contemporary culture, we can look forward to a time when people who have expressed in polls and through other means their interest in having a world in peace, that is, without war, with prosperity and equality, and with a higher probability of happiness in the lives of ordinary people. Historically, the religions have been complicit with all these political regimes in which religious institutions have exercised power, and these ideas have been antithetical to these goals, even as their leaders have made great efforts to accommodate the rapidly growing aspirations of their various flocks. So how has the widespread acceptance of a scientific worldview and the adoption of technology, as we so commonly see these days with our iPads, pods, and everything else, changed the way that we live in a way that would propel us into a religion-free condition?
Well, Jim, it certainly has brought a whole new meaning to the expression of instant gratification, which is typically not fast enough to suit me.
Or anyone else.
Or anyone else, for that matter. But there is some correlation there between the ability to satisfy whatever information needs you have instantly, electronically, and being able to satisfy information needs by relying on, well, I guess some faith in the workings of the universe that require little or no investigation on your part. They require no effort. So there's certainly some correlations between the electronic age and the religious impulse. I definitely think so.
And it is also becoming increasingly evident that the natural environment is becoming very unfriendly to the industrial culture that has so damaged it in our time. You might have seen on the news that we live in a time when the climate is rapidly changing. Sea levels are rising. Ocean acidification is of some concern. There are more wildfires. All kinds of problems are beginning to manifest themselves. And many scientists worldwide expect that these kinds of changes will continue to grow worse. And so it's more of a challenge to us. There's a decided reduction also in the number and quality of natural resources available to us. and it creates a great difficulty in changing the way we live to accommodate these changed conditions and circumstances. And I think that not so much us, but our descendants will likely use a more disciplined and focused approach to the problem of energy, materials, transportation, urban life, and food production, among many other things. The level of understanding required for this new rigor means less time for nonsense like religion, superstition, extravagant consumption, and the squalor rooted in class-imposed poverty. How will the world of ideas reflect the challenges of these new circumstances?
Well, if you have the answer to that question, you should definitely contact us at floridaatheist.org.
Oh, that's a good place.
Which is our home website. That may be up on the screen now or later, we'll never know. Excuse me. But frankly, joining groups, talking about a secular world, thinking about secularism, and moving away from the old institutions, those are our goals, and particularly separating church and state.
In other words,
we want that to stay the same.
And becoming conscious of the way in which you're living and the place in which you're living is the most important thing you can do to try to meet the future. A lot of people who are very much involved with, well, religions and all kinds of other things, bury themselves in it. They're like ostriches. They're trying to get away from all of these problems and difficulties without realizing that what they're going to have to do is meet them. They're going to have to study these things, be aware, make the necessary changes. And I can see that we have 2 minutes in which to continue to carry on like crazy people. So,
well, I don't know about carrying on like crazy people. We may be bringing a whole new meaning to the word domestic drones. I hope not. I hope that 30 minutes is not too bad for the
I'm
average
just all a buzz.
attention span. And certainly it's a topic that we're interested in. In the future, a lot of our shows will have live audiences. We'll be able to field questions. Hopefully, we'll soon be able to take phone calls via regular telephone lines or Skype or whatever. I love interacting with our audience in real time as well. So, personally, thank you all for staying with us for 30 minutes or less. And, of course, the show is available to be viewed online after the show. I think that's correct.
yes, indeed. You can go to our website at floridaatheist.org, and we'll be there waiting for you.
Right.
You can play us over and over again.
And you can join our group while you're there for a mere $20 a year. Remember, it's only $20 a year, and our creditors will be absolutely thrilled, I promise you.
Not to mention us. After all, Joe's in it for the money.
I'm just in it for the money. That's right.
Not really.
Really.
Well, anyway.
Okay, are we ready to read off?
I think we
Read
are.
this thing? You
Yes,
want to read the first
exactly.
line here?
I'm going to read the first line, and what this refers to is the
Our
religious story.
Tagline. Our tagline.
Yeah, this is our tagline. And remember, if the story seems too implausible to be true,
Don't believe it just because somebody wrote it down.
find another reason.
Make them prove it.
Yes.
Thank you for listening to the Atheist Forum. The Atheist Forum comes to you from the Atheists of Florida, a nonprofit membership organization that brings atheists together to become aware of state-church separation issues and to stand up for our constitutionally guaranteed freedom from religion. To learn more about Atheists of Florida, write Post Office Box 130753, Tampa, Florida 33681, or email us at atheistforum@aol.com. And be with us next week for more talk and talk back about freedom from religion here on the Atheist Forum.